All right. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for using the chat to let us know where you're dialing in from. Keep that coming. We're really excited to see an international audience here today. Welcome to a joint webinar between ServiceNow and Calitii on the ITAM for financial services, confidence and regulatory compliance. We are so happy you all are here with us today to discuss such a very relevant topic. As we all know, regulators are ramping up the pressure on institutions to prove complete oversight over your IT asset estate. So today we have a great group here to review this topic in greater detail. And after discussion, we're going to dive into an upcoming ServiceNow product release that will supercharge our customers' ability to manage many of these processes that we discussed today. Before I continue, I want to flash our safe harbor notice here. This presentation contains forward-looking statements. This presentation is for informational purposes only and is not intended for any purchasing decisions. Great. So from the ServiceNow side, I'll be playing the role of the MC today. My name is Michael Scrignamilio. I'm a staff product manager on ServiceNow focused on the asset management BU. I'd like to introduce Akash. Akash, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, my name is Akash Mehta. I'm a IT asset management product manager. I've been with ServiceNow for about 11 years and been with the product team for a little over 3 years. So focused on software asset management and regulatory audit response as well.
Thanks, Michael. Thanks for joining us, everybody. Richard Taylor. I'm Head of Resilience here at Calitii, which is the doubly exciting subjects of GRC, IRM, and SecOps put together, as they should be. And I will, in turn, pass the baton on to my good friend and colleague, Suki Gill.
Thank you, Richard. Good afternoon, good morning to everyone. My name is Suki Gill. I'm the CTO for Calitii. Most of the reason I'm on here today with Richard and guys supporting ServiceNow is that I've ended up spending a fair bit of time on IT asset management related projects where this topic of audit response comes up regularly. So pleased today to be able to come and share some of the challenges and look at what's coming down the line from ServiceNow to help asset managers in this space. Guy, over to you.
Yeah, hey everyone. So I'm an architect at Calitii. My name's Guy Hamilton. My focus is on GRC and SecOps technology. I'll pass back to you, Michael.
Great. Thank you, Calitii team. Okay, so before we get going here, I want to take a moment to talk about IT asset management. Now, I know for our financial services audience, asset management can mean a number of different things, but what we're talking about today is IT asset management, a set of business practices that join the financial, contractual, and inventory functions to automate and support the lifecycle and strategic decision-making for technology asset estate. So ServiceNow's products in this domain can focus on the software end, like end-user software and SaaS applications, and the hardware end, like computers, network devices, and mobile devices. And you can see across the top, we run the gamut on customers that we support with our IT asset management products. Now, just below these products include key functionality, like a robust content library and normalization, different SaaS utilizations, asset lifecycle automation, mobile scanning, and many more different pieces of technology to drive asset management outcomes at your organization. Now, asset management sits within the context of ServiceNow's overall portfolio, and you can see a set of applications that are all built on a single platform, single data model, and single architecture, undergirded by predictive AI and Gen AI capabilities. Now, what sort of outcomes can you expect using asset management from ServiceNow? Well, first and foremost, transparency. So visibility across your full asset estate. That centralized, normalized, and accurate asset information can be extremely powerful when it's deployed across other areas of your organization, like HR, risk, or enterprise architecture. So if you use that asset information to focus on the right investments, that'll reduce cost and ensure that you're maximizing the value of every asset at your organization to improve utilization. These are some common outcomes that we see with customers of our asset management suite. Now, with that table setting out of the way, today we're going to kick off with a discussion between ServiceNow and Calitii on the regulatory landscape and what you need to be thinking about. At about the halfway mark, we're going to jump over to a new product that ServiceNow is launching in Q3 as part of our Zurich release, ITAM for financial services. And we'll end the day by answering some of the Q&A that has come up in chat and introduce some additional opportunities for your organization to learn more. Please submit questions via the Zoom Q&A feature, and we will get to them either during this presentation or following the conclusion. Now, I want to do a temperature check of our audience today with a quick poll. Let me go ahead and launch this. So take a look on, in your experience, how long it typically takes for your asset management team to do what you see on the screen here. Nice, we're seeing some really great spreads of results here, and I'll be sharing them shortly. All right. So let me share these results out. And I'd like to hear from, Richard and Akash, how does this look from what we've heard from our customers thus far?
Yeah, I mean, you're actually doing pretty well, I think, guys, because normally requests for evidence just take extraordinary amounts of time due to system fragmentation, missing data inside people's heads, et cetera, et cetera. So I think you can give yourselves a mini pat on the back for this, I think, but I'll let Akash.
Yeah, no, I think the area that a little worrisome, the 2+ months, around 15%, but also the unsure around 22%. That's, it's definitely an area where, because you have a lot of let's say emails or drive-bys, when you're trying to gather this information, you tend to you're not 100% sure of how long it takes and who has what, and so you risk things falling through the cracks, and I think those are the ones that I'd be the most worried about. 1, 2, 3 weeks, that is, like you said, it is pretty good, and they should definitely kind of pat themselves on the back there. But the areas where we're unsure, it's taken 2+ months, something that needs to be addressed for sure.
Yeah. And I know that we open this to a wide audience here, so I added a sure there because not everybody might be directly affiliated with this process. But this, like I said earlier, this is for informational purposes, and we're really excited to dive more into the types of things you should be thinking about in this next section. Okay, so we're going to take the next 15-20 minutes to talk about different considerations in your regulatory environment. And I'd like to start by, on the ServiceNow side, we've had dozens and dozens of conversations with customers, and we do hear some common traps or myths. And so I'd like to, talk to Akash and Richard here about a couple of these myths. The first one that comes up a lot is that audit's just something that you worry about once a year and then forget about it. So I'd like to hear a little bit more about that from the team.
Yeah, and I think audits, even if you do have an audit point, it can be a very powerful protagonist for change because it can't be ignored. You can't get away from it. But I mean, do we really want to be in a situation where we wait for something to give us a slap around the chops and then only then respond to it? I think the great problem, you want to put like that with audits, is the reactivity of the whole thing. So if we can do things in advance, as it says there, to be a little bit more proactive, even a lot more proactive, especially if you have the data there almost waiting to be tapped anyway, and given the ability for decent audit management systems to be able to monitor programmatically, why not put the work in advance to make audits just a bit easier, to be honest with you, and consequently those reactions and the audit points that come with them smaller, cheaper, less regulatorily challenging.
Yeah, and I think another trap there is, when we think of it as being a once a year, and let's say we do fail an audit, or there's additional questions, it becomes more prevalent, right? It constantly it comes back at you, and so on and so forth, and that's where we need to be careful of this thought where we only have to deal with it once a year or less. So
I think there's also potentially an external kind of reputational risk if you are the kind of bank or the kind of FS organization that is known for constantly failing audit. You don't want to be in that place. Any kind of risk-based assessment of the landscape, they're going to pick on you first. Do you really want to be the center of attention? I personally wouldn't.
True.
Awesome. Well, let's move on to the second myth here that we've seen. So some asset managers might be thinking that they just need to provide an inventory list and they'll be set. So what do we think about that?
Yeah, from my perspective, I think this is more of when you're talking to asset managers, they just don't know that the regulations. They don't know the amount of data that's needed or the type of data that's needed, and it really becomes more of a teamwork effort with your compliance teams to to have a lot of this information. You mentioned it earlier, Richard, where you're setting these up ahead of time. You're setting up controls and things like that to be able to monitor this information ahead of time, so it becomes less of a once a year worry, but also it's not just an individual inventory of data. It's much more process and so on and so forth.
Yeah, and I think there's an awful lot of efficiency can be gained here. It's easy to focus on the negatives in situations like that, but there's a huge amount of efficiency if you're building that really tight config and asset working together, along with the links into the world of compliance and cyber. The amount of money you have to spend doing this in advance is just, you all know this, guys. It's just orders of magnitude less than waiting for something to blow up and then trying to get back to it and tidy things up and retrospectively fix stuff. It's just so much more efficient, which interestingly, if you look at the various regulations, there is a fairly strong focus on, are you making efficient use of your assets? Because if you're not, it just opens up more questions for the auditors, right? Well, really, that's not very efficient. That's not very effective. Why is that? It's the bottom of your jumper. There's a little thread. Keep pulling. Next thing you know, you've got no jumper left. So just again, try and do some things in advance to stop from being a target.
So on that, then, true or false that just throwing the kitchen sink at this process is the right thing to do?
And I think that has a handy point, segueing nicely into this one. We're talking about efficiency. Do we really have the money and the time and the effort to do the same sledgehammer to crack a nut type thing? We've got to be thinking more sort of rapier than sledgehammer. Epee, foil, and saber. Let's try and be a little more precise about all of this stuff. Again, if we've got the description of ourselves right inside a system like ServiceNow, we can focus in on the pieces that need to be focused in on much more quickly, and the ability to link those controls, the DE and OE, the design effectiveness and operating effectiveness, it's all there in that one system of record, okay, with the evidence, the audit trail, and everything that auditors will be looking for. Yeah, so I think it just that one consistent description of yourself really is one of the biggest things you can do to try and make this a lot more effective and efficient.
Yeah, and I think the main takeaway here is giving the right information, right? Making sure you understand the requirement, making sure you because giving regulators, giving auditors too much information obviously opens you up to additional scrutiny and opens you up to additional questions. Now they can go down another path, which may not have even been part of the initial question. So just making sure you give them the right information when they require it versus just kind of handing them, huge amounts of data, and now they have the ability to kind of look and pick and choose what they want to go after.
Yep. We've heard that time and time again from many customers. The last myth I wanted to address is that when an audit comes knocking at the door, that it's one team might think that's not my problem, that's a different team's problem. And, that speaks to silos at organizations. And I was hoping you could touch on that.
Yeah, and certainly just have a look at any of the major operational resilience legislation that's come out, and it is expecting you to be able to pull a golden thread from a tiny little event that happens down here on your asset all the way to impact the client, impact the firm, impact the. You've got to have that joined up description of yourself, right? As most of you guys know, you've seen DORA, you've seen Fed Up Res, you've seen all of the regulations that have come out. You've got to be able to join everything up. And that, in fairness to the op res stuff, I know it's been a lot of effort trying to comply with it, but it really has moved the needle in terms of having related assets, related items, and understanding impact a lot better. Are there still gaps out there? Absolutely. But it really is, I think, helping to challenge this. No, that's not my problem. Well, actually, I can tell you it is your problem, because if you have a look in this governed one source of truth, you're dependent on that thing, whether you realized it or not. So I think that is one where I think OpRes has made big inroads into this myth.
Yeah, and honestly, if you're an asset team and you're not working with your audit team, with your internal compliance teams, you're at the end of the day, you're the one that's going to be asked for all this data, and you're just not prepared for it. And so not having those relationships internally and those processes internally is only going to add to your workload. It's only going to add to the risk of missing something and so on and so forth. And at the end of the day, the best teams out there don't have these silos and have great working relationships with their compliance teams.
All right. Thank you, folks, for going through that. Moving right along now, we understand, we've heard from many of our customers that there are multiple pieces of audits a year, multiple regulation that they're managing at once. So given the overlap there, I wanted to pass it over to Richard to talk a little bit about some of this and how companies can manage this overlap.
Yeah, this is one of my favorite subjects to talk about, so I could probably be here for some time beyond the end of the webinar. But actually, when you're doing this work, when you're executing control tests or audit tests, whatever it is, okay, do you want to do something 25 times to get 25 results, or do you want to do that once and get the same 25 results and get 25 times the value, right? The reason I ask is because inside ServiceNow, the way it works is that the regulations come down and join together at a level called the control objective, a control essentially, okay? That level can be linked to multiple internal and external regulatory documents, so policies, frameworks, standards, procedures, acts of Congress, acts of Parliament, international standards, etc., etc. Okay? Not all IRM, GRC, IRM tools are the same. Not all of them do that. Some of them take a top-down approach where, yes, okay, do you get to say, I am compliant with 23 NYCRR 500, I am compliant with DORA, I am compliant with the FFIEC AIO handbook, blah, 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 right? But they exist as silos, right? The same things at the bottom level, and there are only so many things with assets you can actually test, okay? Now, when we did this analysis exercise, we had a look at the various regulations, and it's not unsurprising, depending on which regs you add in and take out of your overall list that you have to comply with, it is not unusual to get more than 50% duplication of the things that need tested. So you tell me, do you want to spend twice the amount of work to get the same result, or do you want to do it once? And I get this, ServiceNow we refer to it as test once, comply many, right? And that bottom-up approach, we say, here's the thing that needs tested. I will then link it to multiple regulatory artifacts rather than multiple triangular regulatory artifacts all standing alone. Okay, it's just it's sheer common sense, right? The other thing is it's a high volume problem. Okay, if you don't deduplicate this stuff, we're not talking one or two or dozens of controls. There's thousands, right? AO handbook 1200, development acquisition maintenance around 1,000. That's 2,200 just for those two handbooks. Start adding on in a sort of tier 1 FS. You're going to be having 700 to 1,000 easily regulations that you have to comply with if you're operating globally. This is an extremely high volume problem. So anything you can do at the efficiency level, which again is playing back to what the regulations are asking for, is multiplied many, many times. You're getting the benefit many, many times. Corollary, of course, is if you don't do it, you're getting the disbenefit thousands, maybe even tens of thousands of times. So there's a really strong driver, I think, in terms of efficiency to actually get to where we went to. And you can see here that regulatory picture we have on the right-hand side. It really is common. The narrower the subject, the higher the overlap as well. So when we're not just talking about general IT controls, IT asset controls, the percentage, and that's a very rough figure, by the way, it can sometimes be as much as 80% overlap, Yeah. So that ability to bring that stuff together. And then, of course, for audit, to be able to look at those controls, the control tests that have been taking place, and reuse those without having APIs or separate data models, which have to be kept in sync over time, creating technical debt. Huge time saver, absolutely huge money saver. So that's one of my favorite little subjects in all of IRM is deduplicated controls.
Real quick question, Richard, when you're working with customers, when you're working with various clients through this process, and you first come, how much can you help them with this efficiency as you're going through these various regulations that are on that cover that particular organization? How much can you help reduce, right? Like you talk about 50% possible overlap, 80%. How long does that take to reduce the number of controls and improve the efficiency? How long does that take, and how much can you improve there?
I mean, it depends whether the regulatory feed provider they've got is on board with the way that ServiceNow look at the world of deduplication. Some aren't. Okay, but if you've got the right regulatory feed provider, it can be extremely quick, to be honest with you. Yes, okay. Have we got an entire body of evidence that we have to figure out getting from A to B and keeping an audit trail, et cetera, et cetera? But actually, in terms of connecting the regulatory feed providers, those are APIs, they're REST APIs, okay? We can bring that information in extremely quickly. And again, some of the regulatory feed providers as well will also have those controls, programmatical controls. So it can be done really, really quickly indeed. Well, what is a bit more of a time user is getting and maintaining that audit trail of everything that has ever been tested ever, and figuring out how to make that work in the new world. But actually getting in, getting the connection in there, getting that list of deduplicate controls and everything else. And for example, the regulatory feed provider we use, they also align those controls against BIAN, the Banking Industry Architecture Network Framework. So even if you're a small department in an FS retail bank, for example, we can tell you exactly which controls you shouldn't be running and the various documentation you need. So that, I think the time savings there, not just in the deduplication, but actually having a pre-cleansed set of controls and data coming in, absolutely vast potential time savings. And the last figures I had, I believe it was somewhere in the region of 11% of revenue that your average FS was actually devoting to compliance and risk management these days. And that's a huge figure, probably unsustainable in the long run. And I think some of the work we see with AI will certainly start helping with the time scales on that as well. But key things, pre-cleansed data coming in, deduplicated controls, and then we can use AI with that really good description yourself and having a structured data set of your description, structured data set of the data, then AI can really start to sing.
All right. So given that, speaking about where your data lives today, Akash, can you give us kind of an overview of where folks can find this data?
Yeah, so I mean, Richard talked about the GRC model, the IRM product within ServiceNow. A lot of that looks at just base data that we have available in ServiceNow. Like IT asset management is one component of it. Obviously, your CMDB, how it ties into your ITSM process, problem changes, incidents, and so on and so forth, major incidents. But then tying in like enterprise architecture, so what used to be application portfolio management, tying that data in, your business services, your business applications, the infrastructure that supports it, that references your CMDB. From an IT asset management perspective, how that data was brought in from a request, how is it leaving the organization through disposal processes, all of those various processes that we run. And we have data for inside of ServiceNow, all help support various aspects of regulatory audit. And so being able to implement that, being able to have that in a single platform, I know our customers have heard about it all the time, having that single platform, having that transparency, to be able to see all that data, references to the various modules and things like that, pulling that data, being able to show that the necessary evidence makes that so much easier when you have that living and processed through within ServiceNow.
And I think another point leading on from that, Akash, is that a lot of the regulations, of course, are talking about aligning with objectives. Is my asset landscape supporting my objectives as a company or not, and can I prove it? Okay, one of my I shouldn't say it, but possibly even like strategic portfolio management, EA, more than I like GRC, IRM in the platform. I'm not sure I'm allowed to say that, but it's a good job nobody's listening. So the reason I like it is because the big mantra is CMDB first, right? I think that's wrong, right? I think strategic portfolio management first, because that's where you set your objectives and your plans and your priorities and your goals, right? And that's also, of course, where you've got project portfolio management. So if you're going to do a CSDM CMDB project, but you don't have project portfolio management, how do I manage my project? Yeah, so that EA piece there, and overlooked, but actually a really, really, I'm sorry, I know this sounds like a sales pitch, but it genuinely is a really complementary part of the platform when it comes to bringing everything together. Because that, like I say, that is where your objectives, the whole reason, the goals, and these can be quantified, the goals can be measured and linked back to the stuff you're doing to improve your asset landscape. Okay. All of this stuff links together. And again, have a look at what the regulations are saying. They're saying you need to be integrated. They're saying you need to have risk management in place for all of this stuff. So of course you're going to have to join all of this stuff. At some point, ideally, you would have IRM sitting there in its larger guise, being able to drive all of this along, right? Obviously, the inventory piece here with CMDB and ITSM with change management, of course. Once we've got this in place, are we governing? Are we giving our changes? Are we keeping control of what we put in so it hasn't significantly deviated from what we put in the first place? And underlying all of this is just cost. We're trying to keep costs down. We're trying to be efficient and not let the dollars sort of flow out the door. But certainly, what the regulations are asking for, they're sort of saying, can you prove your controls work, right? Are you aligned with your business objectives, and can you prove this in a continuous and ongoing way, in alignment with every single one of the regulations, the jurisdictions you're operating in? A customer we're talking to a couple of weeks ago, they're operating in 149 countries, right? Anyone who thinks they can go, oh yeah, I know which regulations are in all 149 countries. I couldn't do that. It's it's going to be a vast number of things, and that's what we're showing you today. The whole point of this is let's break it down into its pieces, join all of that stuff up correctly, and then put it back together to just take some of the workload off, right? To try and reduce the errors, to try and stop stuff being missed, to try and reduce the attack surface, right? The cyber attack surface. There's loads of added benefits on top of this, but that's really what the regulations are getting at. They're expecting to see at the governance layer, they're expecting to see a policy, and that policy should have a standard with all the metrics that live in it, and it should have the procedures that generate the data, that feed the metrics in the standard, that link back to the policy, tick, 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 tick. Okay, they're expecting to see that.
To that, real quick question, right? Like, regulators, will they understand? Will they be able to, if you can show a plan in place, a plan to get to where you want to get to from a maturity level? Like, not every customer is going to be as mature on day one or day whatever. Do they understand that from a maturity perspective, you can at least show like you have a plan in place to get to that level of maturity to be able to show in the future or these various control objectives, these various controls, tying back to these various modules and so on and so forth?
Yeah, I mean, I go sailing with these. I'm a member of the Bank of England. Sorry, the name drop. I'm a member of the Bank of England Sailing Club, so I sail with the regulators on a regular basis. And they're not completely unreasonable people. If you say to them, you've audited me, you find I've got nothing, haven't got a plan, sorry, I mean, they're going to take you to the cleaners, right? Whereas the conversations I've had are like, what we want to see at least is a plan with a budget, right? And at least some movement along that plan. People know it, you're getting, again, policies and standards and procedures in place. You're training people on these things. You're conducting gap analysis to understand where you need to get to. You've got an asset management system in place. You're maybe even starting to run your first internal audits for the purposes of understanding what's wrong, what's right, and doing continual improvement. You've just got to have something. You've got to give them some meat. Otherwise, if you were them, you'd be like, so you've done nothing, you've got no plan, you've got no money. I'll have your license. Thank you very much. Goodbye. So absolutely. The examples we've seen are that the regulators expect you to have some movement along that journey, that life cycle to full maturity, if you want to call it that. Yeah.
Makes sense.
All right. So we want to get over and make sure we're showing off some upcoming features shortly. So spend about maybe 5 more minutes on these last 2 slides. I wanted to hand it over to Suki to give us an overview of, based on the conversation that he's having every day, what are the challenges that he sees out there for our asset managers?
Michael, thank you. And a lot of the conversation already has touched on some of these topics, so I'll just build on it. So look, if we look at the kind of projects we're involved in, there's typically a change required because the asset inventory, the configuration repository was not accurate, complete, and up to date at the point at which either internal or external audit took place. That results in a number of findings that need to be addressed. A lot of those findings are related to people, process, governance, controls, rarely do the findings name technology as the problem or the solution. They just say you don't have an accurate inventory. We didn't see evidence of controls around governance, etc. And the program or a project that is actually trying to address these already has a list of findings they're trying to address. One of the challenges there is if all you do is address the findings, there's a danger when you sit the exam the next time, they'll find something else that you didn't address. So you need to go back to first principles. It's the last bullet on here. And this is why when you see the demo, you're going to see the full regulations mapped out, and you should be really tracking evidence of controls against those regulations and then checking, did we cover all of the audit findings that were found? The other challenge asset managers have is they have to address multiple stakeholders. That was covered already. So second line, risk and compliance, typically where the risks are laid out, mapped to the controls. So they have to show during a change project where they're implementing an approved asset inventory and the new controls, during that project, they need to be showing evidence that the control architecture and design will address the shortcomings of the findings and also the risks and issues. So a close partnership with risk and compliance during that sort of change project is important. Additionally, a project where you're trying to rectify an asset audit issue, there's normally a remediation plan that is being tracked at very senior levels. So there's a need to report progress against those milestones, while at the same time, the actual activities of doing the process design, the control design, ensuring we're building out the data model conformant with Common Services Data Model, CSDM. The technology services and the application services have been mentioned. If you want workflow to automate some of the work here, you have to at least describe those technology organizations and applications in the ServiceNow model. Now, the challenge we're seeing a lot is that during the design, build, and implement phase, there's a real focus on getting the technology right and getting the processes right. You cannot take your eye off the ball, though, because at the end of the ultimate project, which typically involves a OCM phase, organizational change management, to make sure that people now are following the new processes and controls that have been laid out. And after a sustain phase, normally we see a minimum of 3 months, maybe even longer, where in a sustain phase, you're producing evidence that the processes and controls are being executed by the right people with the right skills. That data that you need to keep and maintain in the sustain phase to show evidence of those controls, it normally happens after ServiceNow or a partner like Calitii has been involved in the design, build, and implement phase. So the asset manager is somewhat left on their own going, well, we've just implemented a whole bunch of technology to automate these process and controls that were designed either by the same team or our internal team. But now I have to report on the accurate inventory and the controls being in place. And typically that's done off platform. When I mean off platform, it's either in a system like Archer or where the controls are documented or in a spreadsheet, dare I say, or the data itself is sucked out of the platform and then manipulated using BI tools to show evidence. We feel, at least Calitii with ServiceNow here, that doing this on platform would really alleviate some of these challenges of trying to address this reporting and evidence of controls. And then to the point that was made earlier, look, the regulators and the internal audit teams, they're not unreasonable. So they're looking for a plan. Rarely do we see at the end of design, build, and implement of HAM, discovery, SAM, etc., that you'll be 100% in all your inventories across various asset classes and that all the controls will have executed. You might just have got your governance up and going at the end of the implement phase. So maintaining a plan, showing where you are on progress of that plan and showing evidence of that from the data in the system is really important. And just because none of this work is typically done on platform and it's done after the implementation phase, I think asset managers struggle. a lot to try and do this. So what we normally do is we engage with these kind of projects. We say to the asset manager, at the end of this project, can we talk about the reporting and the regulatory compliance and your audit pack? What does that audit pack look like that you're going to have to show? And let's draft one during the building implementation phase so that when we get to the end of this project, we've handheld you through the process so that you can be self-sustained afterwards. And sometimes that includes a level of education and training, ride along. So somebody supporting the asset manager for a while. I really think, though, what we're about to see will be a significant help and aid to asset managers, because the challenges in that sustain phase are not the data. Not the data exists in ServiceNow. It's actually tying it to a set of controls that are typically not on platform. The last point I'll make is, look, implementing full-scale GRC alongside an asset management project is too much of an undertaking for most large organizations. So typically they focus on asset and they leave this issue about how we'll report against the regulations till later, and it comes and bites them. And so I think what you're about to see is there's some help here for asset managers to do this as part of the asset management project. And then obviously in the sustain phase, in the operate phase, this platform capability is available to do the reporting ad hoc as well.
Fantastic. Well, thank you, Calitii team. I think quickly wrapping up here, we talked about not only the technology, but it's the process, it's the governance at your organization. Expectation management is going to be key. I want to jump over to the product for the sake of time. And I want to thank Calitii again for your overview there, that really awesome discussion. And anyone who has questions, I've seen some questions come through chat. Please use the Q&A feature so we can have them kind of organized for the end of the conversation. Now, ServiceNow is very excited to introduce ITAM for financial services. This is a new product that'll be launching in Q3 as part of our Zurich release. And so Akash and I are going to preview the product today before diving a bit deeper into capabilities. Now, I don't need to belabor this. We've talked about this a lot, but we've obviously spoken to dozens and dozens, hundreds of customers here. We've heard several common themes. We've heard themes around reactive processes, that auditing can become a firefighting exercise for different teams. Of course, that opens the door to compliance risks, incomplete data, and human error. We hear about the pain points of frequent back and forths, fragmented data gathering that can happen across different systems or on Excel or wherever, and the coordination efforts that need to happen across these siloed teams. We all know how high the stakes are: fines, scrutiny, reputational damage. ITAM for financial services will enable asset management teams to manage and respond to requests for evidence in a purpose-built workspace. And this product will facilitate the collaboration between the asset teams and the compliance teams. In short, we want our customers to be audit ready. So customers will find built-in content to help support the audit response for various regulators. The product includes a guided experience for the asset manager to perform the repeatable processes and ensure accurate and complete data. This includes the ability to assign evidence gathering to the appropriate SMEs in the platform and easily access responses to audits from the past. So you can continue to take action with repeatable processes, and you can see that cookie crumb traceability to your past. Now, what does this look like with the characters, at your organization? So I think we can better understand the use case by introducing these two employees, Janet and Mia, our ITAM manager and a compliance manager. So Janet is the asset manager who is responsible for the overall health and accuracy of assets at her organization. She's well aware of how important it is to demonstrate a complete and accurate inventory of all those assets, along with the associated risks of those assets based on that lifecycle information that she's extremely privy to. Whereas Mia, a compliance manager, her responsibilities include, but are not limited to, working with many different internal and external auditors, managing the overall audit, and gathering that needed evidence from the right teams. So building a bridge, increasing communication between these two sides of the house is fundamental to success and really the crux of our product. Now, asset audit response is a flow within ITAM for financial services. So let's take a look at how that works at a high level. We start with Mia, who receives the notification from an external regulatory audit, and she begins to execute management of that overall audit process. So she logs into her audit workspace, And now this workspace is an area where it can reduce legacy communication because Mia is able to create and manage the engagement from this command center, and she can create requests for others directly from this platform. She has access to various regulatory content like FFIEC and NYDFS and the associated control objectives. So in this example, Mia creates a request for the asset management team, or Janet, to provide evidence related to a specific control objective. And this is where her colleague taps in. She gets engaged where the evidence request is assigned to her. And in her own workspace, Janet's asset governance workspace, she has full visibility into all the evidence requests going on at once at her organization. And as we talked about earlier, we know those can be simultaneous and they can be overwhelming. So from this workspace, from this dashboard, she can take action. In this specific instance, Janet opens up that evidence request and she's presented with a guided experience to help her collect the details that she needs to fulfill that request from Mia. Janet can assign evidence tasks to team members directly from this platform, and she can create remediation rules that look at the data to be used for the evidence, identify where there are gaps, and generate remediation tasks to rectify. From this portal, Janet's able to oversee the collection of evidence, the progress of remediation tasks, and when she feels that everything's in an acceptable state, she can submit that final package back to Mia, who can then take that onward to the auditors. So this flowchart is a nice visual, but I think nothing speaks better than actually diving in. So I'm going to hand it over to Akash, who will be sharing his screen and showing us what this will look like in a demo environment.
Sounds good then, Michael. All right, just let me know that you can see my screen. So, as Michael mentioned, we're going to start here within the audit workspace for Mia. So here, she'll be able to go and create a new, in this case, we're going to create an audit engagement and generate the necessary information to be able to kick off this overall process. She adds in some details like, description, the type of audit it is, maybe a naming convention that they may have, as well as some due date information and so on and so forth. Let's go ahead and save this record. And from here, she'll be able to go and start creating the necessary evidence requests. So with our full, IRM product, there's various controls and control objectives that might do some automation, automated controls. With the ITAM for financial services, we have the ability to visualize those controls, but also see and add necessary evidence throughout this process as well for our various teams to help respond to this audit. So I'm going to go ahead and create an evidence request and fill in the necessary information, due dates, tie in a specific control objective, and maybe some additional collection details, some additional instructions, and go ahead and request that from from Janet and her asset team. Let's drill down into this record, make sure I've got all the necessary information. If there's some additional details, I can fill that in here. Otherwise, we'll turn our attention to Janet and move over to the asset governance workspace. So with the asset governance workspace, again, part of the ITAM for financial services, they'll be able to see things like existing evidence requests that have come through, where they are in that process. Any evidence records that might be new or outstanding that need to get completed, remediation tasks that might be supporting other audit requests as well, and they can kind of see where they are from a progress perspective. For this particular demo, we're going to drill down into the new asset evidence request that came in for this FFIEC audit, and see if we have enough details to help support and help respond to this overall evidence request. So here, before we go and accept it, we can review this overall evidence request, make sure we have enough information. If there isn't enough information, we have the ability to reject this with a reject reason that sends it back to Mia Davis, and so she can fill out the necessary information. Even if it's assigned to the wrong team or something like that, we could go ahead and reject that and identify as the reason. In this situation, everything looks good. We're going to go ahead and accept it. Once I've accepted it, now I can start the process of collecting the necessary evidence and fulfilling this overall request. So Janet now will go ahead and add in the necessary information around the evidence. In this situation, we have various concepts that we could utilize for evidence type. We could utilize the new data visualizations that we have in ServiceNow, legacy reports if we're still using those. If they're just attachments of PDFs or attachments of process or any sort of documentation, we can add those as attachments, and I'll show that here in a minute. We also have the ability to assign this out to other team members. So if Janet's not able to do this, maybe she wants to assign this out to the EA team or the CMDB team, that has that data, knows that data, and can help respond to these evidence requests as well. So let's go ahead and save this record. Let's go ahead and add that report to the record itself. And now we can go and add another piece of evidence while we're going through this. So let's go ahead and add another piece of evidence. We'll add a disposal flow, and again, I can add that attachment right here to this evidence record, and save that and move that forward as well. Now that we have all of our evidence attached to this evidence request, let's go ahead and utilize this new capability called evidence remediation rules. And what we're trying to do here within this evidence remediation rule is identify any particular gaps that we have in evidence. So in this situation, I'm going to go ahead and look for any asset records or any computer records that are that have a missing assigned to and missing location. So we'll go ahead and set our filter. We're going to look at things that are installed, and then we'll go ahead and set the condition. So the condition is what we're actually trying to identify. If it's missing, let's create a remediation task for that missing data. So go ahead and set that and save that record. In addition, I'm going to go ahead and add another remediation rule to this process, and we'll add a serial number. A serial number validation as well. So if there's any serial numbers that we're missing, let's go ahead and find those before we move this on to the audit team. So now within my readiness stage, I see what assets have been evaluated, which ones are at risk. I've identified, or I'm showing here the individual pieces of evidence that we'll be reviewing and we'll be sending over to the team, to the audit team, as well as any remediation tasks. So here you can see for the two types of remediation rules, we have a couple of remediation tasks. I could break that up if I wanted to, assign that out to various teams based off of, let's say, the class of the asset, or we can keep it in as one individual remediation task as well. Before I move forward, we'll go ahead and move into the remediation stage of this before we send this out. This gives our CMDB teams or other teams that have been assigned these tasks the time to remediate those and before we actually submit that information. However, in this case, because we're of due dates, we're going to go ahead and move to the review stage and just identify those remediation tasks as a follow-up or remediation plan for our auditors. So I'll move to the review stage here. Again, we identify like what remediation tasks we still have left, what evidence we are about to send over, the attachments and so on and so forth, as well as the remediation tasks that are outstanding. So again, being able to have a plan in place to be able to show the auditors will help with this process. If we needed to create an additional remediation task for any process-related improvements or anything, we can show that here as well. In this situation, I'm going to go ahead and submit this for review. Once I've submitted that, we go back into, we change the state of this to a pending review, and then back on our audit workspace, Mia can go and back into that the FFIEC audit, take a look at that evidence, and she'll see that it's now in a review state on her side as well as the attachments that were attached to the initial request are back onto this evidence to help provide to the auditors themselves. So again, just an entire flow to be able to facilitate that collaboration, to be able to attach the evidence and be able to pinpoint back to the individual control objectives of what evidence is help supporting what, and basically a historical understanding of what we submitted and how we responded previously to that overall evidence request. All right, back to you, Michael.
All right. Thank you for walking through that demo. I want to have this on screen for a little bit because if you're on this call, you want to dive deeper into that. You want to help us shape this product along our future roadmap as we continue to innovate on it. Please scan this QR code and sign up. It's just one question. We want to know a little bit more about you. And if you are a ServiceNow customer, if you are a customer of Ham or Sam, and you're interested in collaborating with the product team, the design team, in any format possible, a deep dive or something lighter, just let us know and we'll be sure to reach out and work with you as opportunities come up. So let me go to questions here before we wrap up. Now, I took a look at the Q&A. Didn't seem like we had any coming in during Akash's presentation. I saw we had a question earlier come up that I can read, which was from Christina, can the modules provide value if the CMDB is lacking sufficient data? I did see Richard took a stab at that in chat, but maybe Richard, do you want to articulate that for the audience?
Yeah, I mean, ideally, you've got this one perfect description of yourself, and I'll let Guy chip in a little bit. Ideally, you get this one perfect description of yourself, in which case, yes, indeed, you get much, much more value. But even if you haven't, it's still outlining the places where you don't have that data, if that makes sense. So it's highlighting the gaps. Would you agree with that, Guy?
Yeah, I think that's right. And using the functionality that you've seen in that module, like you said, you highlight that data and you see where you need to go and go and focus that effort. Because I suppose just because you don't have the data doesn't necessarily mean the auditors won't ask for it, right? It's just somewhere you need to plan for.
Yeah, and I think that goes back to what all the regulations are continually reiterating around continuous improvement. Yes, no one's going to be. I've never seen a perfect customer yet, but at least if we've got some metrics, right, and we've got some red on dashboards, then we know where to focus our limited resources.
Absolutely. Josh, we have a question here in the Q&A on is being able to use the audit workspace, does it require a well-configured GRC module?
So the audit workspace really is there to help facilitate the collaboration between your compliance teams and your, in this case, your asset teams. It does not need to be, in this case, from a verbiage perspective, a well-configured GRC module. Definitely, it helps the more information you have within that specific audit workspace, but it definitely does not have to start out that way. Even just having that where your compliance teams have a specific, dedicated workspace to be able to start managing the engagement, managing those various requests for evidence would be extremely helpful to even start with.
All right. We'll keep our eye on the Q&A, but I would like to take a couple minutes to talk about a couple of other things coming up. The first is 2025 Nexus for Asset event. This is the first of its kind for the IT asset management team at ServiceNow. We are extremely excited to, and there's the link in the chat. We are extremely excited to be hosting between October 7th and 8th at our Santa Clara office, an event just for asset managers. It's not a sales event. This is information. This is peer knowledge exchange, roundtable discussions, breakout sessions, presentations from folks achieving great outcomes with the product, and a chance for our customers to meet their peers and get hands-on with different pieces of the product. We are continuing to look. Oh, and I want to make sure I make it clear that it is a free event, which we are very excited about as well. So register at the link. If you're interested in being a speaker, if you have a particular outcome in your asset management that you think would translate really nicely, we would absolutely love to hear from you. So please reach out to me, Michael Scrignomilio, for any further thoughts on that, but use the QR code here to sign up. Next, we always have a number of World Forum events over the year. And I believe Calitii will be at our World Forum in London. Richard, is that correct?
That is correct, sir. We will be there live and direct.
So if you are in the area, please go there. If you're in any of the areas where ServiceNow is doing World Forums, we hope to see you there. But it would be great to come and meet the team if you're in that area as well. So register at the link here. And Richard, do you want to explain about this event?
Yeah, thanks, Michael. So yes, we will be co-sponsoring with ServiceNow and co-standing, literally and metaphorically, together for this particular event on the 11th and 12th of November 2025 this year in London. So again, if you can make it to that, we'd be delighted to try and help you with any of your IRM asset management challenges.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone, for taking the time today to learn more about this. Please reach out through the links or please email us with any questions. And it was a delight to have this conversation with Calitii. Thank you, folks, for being here on the line.
Thank you, Michael.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, team.
Thanks,
Yep.
everyone.